So welcome everyone, and let us know where you're watching from. You can drop that into the chat. We'd love to know where you are right now while you're watching. I'm here in Massachusetts. It'd be great to hear from you. Got some people close by. Some people are very far away. We got East Coast, West Coast, and everywhere in between. This is great. All right, welcome everyone to Strengthening the Parent-Teacher Partnership webinar. I'm super excited to be here with a great set of panelists with us tonight. Our panelists are responsive classroom educators and parents, and so we're really excited to hear from them on this topic. So I want to tell you a little bit about how this webinar is set up. So you can see us, but we can't see you. And that's okay. We know you're here because you are in the chat and we can see a list of our attendees. So that's great. We know that you're there. And so you can use the chat to let us know where you're from right now, but also just to make some positive comments as we're talking and sharing. Feel free to drop in some connections that you have to what our panelists are sharing. And we can use the question and answer feature if someone has a specific question for our panelists. If we have time at the end, we can take some questions. And so we're also going to be doing some book giveaways tonight, so that'll be really fun. So we're glad that you're here with us live, and we're hoping to give away some copies of this new book from the Center for Responsive Schools. So my name is Kristen Vinson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Marketing for the Center for Responsive Schools. And the Center for Responsive Schools are the developers of the Responsive Classroom Approach and the Fly 5 curriculum. And we're just happy to be here to feature this new book, Strengthening the Parent-Teacher Partnership. So I'd like to introduce our panelists that we have with us tonight. And our panelists are Jane Kofi, our author of the book, and she's also a consulting teacher and curriculum developer. We have Melanie Barbas, we have Patty Cano, and we have Yvette Robles. So I'm going to start with Jane and just let Jane introduce herself.
Thanks, Kristen. Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Kofi, and I am joining you this evening from Richmond, Virginia. I am a curriculum and instructional designer with the Center for Responsive Schools. But prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. I taught pre-K through 5th grade for 20 years before I became a full-time curriculum instructional designer with the center. But I am also a consulting teacher for Responsive Classroom as well. I have a middle school child who is really excited about school. And so that gives me a lot to be thinking about and a lot to reflect upon as I get to see her through her journey in school. And so that's just kind of a little bit about me. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Jane. Melanie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Barbas. I'm coming to you from Newcastle, Delaware. I am the lead teacher for classroom culture for the Colonial School District. Before taking that role, which I've had for about 3 years, I taught primarily 2nd and 3rd grade, first in Cecil County, Maryland, and then in the Colonial School District. This was my 3rd summer as a responsive classroom consulting teacher, which I'm really excited to be part of. I have 2 children, a 16-year-old son who's entering his junior year in high school, and an 18-year-old daughter who is starting her elementary ed prep program at college next week.
That's so great. I love that, Melanie. Patty, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everybody. I'm coming from Missoula, Montana. I am originally from Colombia, and I have over 25 years of experience. So in my years of experience in teaching, I have been in different grade levels, I started as a preschool teacher, and then I moved up in elementary grades, middle school, high school, college, and recently I've been in second and third grade. And I have two boys. One is going to start in middle school, 7th grade, and a 4th grade. So they are very excited. And as Jane said, yeah, it also gets me a lot of thinking about they being more involved in their learning and getting them excited for the year that is coming up. Yeah, so.
Great, thank you. Welcome. And Yvette.
Would help, right? If I unmute myself. Hi, everyone. I am Yvette Robles. I am coming to you from Virginia. I work in Fairfax County Public Schools as a responsive classroom curriculum resource teacher. And prior to that, to doing the work that I'm doing now, I spent 23 years in the classroom. So this would be my 29th year in education. 23 of those years in the classroom, working with elementary ed students and using the responsive classroom approach for 21 of those years. I do consulting work for the Center for Responsive Schools on a per diem basis. And I've been doing that for about maybe 22 years now. Doesn't seem like it's been that long. Raised several children, and now I am just happy to see 9 grandkids growing and starting school and going through their changes as young children.
That's wonderful. That's great. And so I can tell already from this panel that there's so much experience here as educators and as parents. So that'll bring that all together in our discussion tonight. So thanks for everyone who dropped in the chat where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. And something that someone just, I'm gonna stop sharing right now, something that someone just dropped into the chat. They had said that one thing that online learning has taught them is that the power of parent-teacher partnerships is so successful for teaching and learning. And I couldn't agree more. And that's why we're here. And that's why Jane wrote this book. And we're really excited to be here. So I just want to remind everyone who is joining us tonight that you'll receive a follow-up email in a few days with a recording of this webinar. So it'll be available on the Responsive Classroom website, and it'll also be available on our YouTube channel. So if you have a friend or colleague who registered and couldn't make it tonight, they'll also get a recording of the webinar as well. So we're going to get started with the content of the webinar tonight, and the content comes from a new book called Strengthening the Parent-Teacher Partnership, which is available for pre-order in the RC bookstore. And I'll drop a link to that in the chat, but we'll get started with our discussion. And so we're going to start with a question for our panelists. So at the start of the school year, it's part of our planning to put energy into creating a positive parent-teacher partnership. This is so important for a successful school year. So what are some successful practices that help you establish this partnership with parents and caregivers at the start of the year? So we'll start with Melanie.
Thanks, Kristen. A couple of things that I have found really successful, both as an educator and then on the other end as a parent, is that early connection between school and home. So making phone calls home to your families can just open a conversation that can be the foundation of the relationship that you're building. Sending a parent survey in the school where I taught. It was a neighborhood-based school, really. So we often had siblings in multiple grade levels, and it was helpful to know, what teachers the siblings had that year. Asking parents what their preferred type of communication would be. Did they have an email address? Do they prefer text messages? Asking parents what their hopes were for their student for the year, what their child's strengths were, what they were interested in outside of school. And I found that really helped with getting to know my families and getting to see how the families and caregivers knew their students, kind of giving me that insight into things that I might not know by interacting with the student in the classroom. And that really established the lines of communication in a positive way at the start of the year. And I found that as a mom, the teachers that have reached out to us at the beginning of the year, and, now that my kids are older in high school and whatnot, often it's through email or it's through Schoology, which is our learning management platform where I work, or the Remind app, and just saying like, hey, I'm your kid's teacher, wanted to just make a connection. Here's how you can find, the syllabus, or here's my office hours, or whatever it might be. Really sets us up to know our families just the same as we're working to know our students.
Yeah, that's really lots of great strategies there. Connecting early, connecting often. Patty, do you have anything to share about what are some of the practices you use to establish that partnership at the beginning of the year? Oh, and you just have to unmute yourself, Patty.
I forgot about that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, in addition to what Melanie says, that early connection with parents, like I found that, yes, I agree with you, like definitely reaching out to parents before school starts and getting them to know you and for you to know them is really important. Just kind of eases also that kind of anxiety for parents and for the students. I have found that meeting really plays a big part on that successful relationship that you start building with the parents and with the students. So over the summer, I kind of like choose a couple of things that I have done and I share with the parents. So I send a letter before school starts to them and I ask them a couple of questions so that letter that I send, that email, also connects with my Hopes and Dreams conference that I have very early in September. But I share a little bit about myself, like outside the school, so parents know who you are and the kids know that they can connect you with, okay, I like to read books too. I like to paddle board. I like those activities, and and you get closer in that relationship that you are also a human being, because sometimes like kids think that, oh, that's my teacher, but they don't do anything else. They just like be in the classroom. So it's a nice way to do to build that relationship. Another thing that has worked really well, we did it during COVID and we did it before COVID, was to have a parent meeting with new families. So we usually have multi-age class in our school. So I have my students, I have my second and third graders, but my third graders are with me for a second year. So my second graders will be my new families, my new students. And sometimes within that, there are new students at the school and new families. So we have a parent meeting just for those new families. So we have more time to connect just with them. And I found that when that is like the first encounter that you have with those families are so important, those first impressions, and making it all about them, like getting to know them and asking them information about what they will, how can I support your child? It's so important. Like, what are your hopes and dreams and what are your expectations for this year? What works for you last year? What didn't work, and how getting that information in advance really help you as a teacher to know that, oh, these things I used to do, but those things don't work for this family or for this child. So I know that, and being proactive in knowing that information helps you plan better for your year and to support the families and the children that you're going to have in the classroom.
That's a really important point about sharing about you. You know, the more that you share about yourself and open up, that's just an invitation for others to do as well. Yvette, anything else to add? There were a lot of strategies already shared.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. And definitely the point about starting before school starts, super important. I would have those goal setting conferences with parents a few weeks before school started. And so establishing that communication, I think that asking questions about their child, because parents like to talk about their children, right? And when we show an interest, we want to know who these students are going to be that are going to be walking into our classrooms. It puts parents in that sort of like collaborative mindset, right? We're working together, we're a team. And so asking questions about their students, their strengths, maybe areas that they think that students might need additional support with at the beginning of the school year is also super important. So definitely taking time to get to know the families, but at the same time, that interest in their children, because that's what they want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jane, welcome to the conversation, and we're really excited about your book. And so I know that when you were getting ready to write this book, you were thinking about what have we always done to connect with parents, and what are we doing now? Because certainly the pandemic has taught us, really new and creative ways for connecting with parents. So what do you have to share from the research that you did?
It's interesting, and I think Patricia already said a little bit of this, or she touched upon it when she said there might be things that we've done in the past that worked really well, but then you realize it doesn't work for this particular family. And so with every year, and not just this past year, because this past year was very different for everyone, but in every year is different. And so that means every year gives us the opportunity to reflect and refine practices. I know when I first started teaching, I would think about, this works great for me. And it did. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then also thinking about, this works well for me. And is it also working for the families that I'm serving, and for their families and for the students? And then also thinking about, so if this works, what do I need to tweak so that it's a strategy or a practice that I'm using that allows for families to feel and be seen and heard? Or is it just something that I'm using because it works really well for me and I've used it in the past? And I think what has helped, even though the pandemic has been negative in a lot of ways, but there are things that have come out of it that have been eye-opening in terms of saying, this worked, but now I see there's other things that we can do that will also support families that we hadn't tried before because we didn't have to. And now that we have to, it's the idea of, we can put this in place because it's something now that we can use, not just this year because of the year that it was, but in years to come. And I think being able to make those shifts, not just because it works for us, but that it also works for families, is really important, because it allows us to grow in those practices and continue to refine and strengthen those relationships with families.
Yeah, really important stuff there. So in thinking about getting to know our families and getting to know the parents and caregivers, in what ways does knowing parents and families help to strengthen your relationship with the students? And so if you also want to share other ways that you get to know parents and caregivers, and how that strengthens your relationship with students. I think we'll start with Patty this time, if you have something to share about that.
Okay. So one way that I get to strengthening that relationship over the year is I try to, in my first encounters, I also ask them about what are some things that you would like to share with us in the class during the year. And in my curriculum meetings, I share with them, we are an IB school, so I share with them some of the units of inquiry that we're going to be studying during the year. So I invite them to come and support the learning in the classroom. So sometimes I have experts on geology and I need some geologists to come into the classroom. So I invite them, and that really supports engagement for the students, and the parents know what is happening in the classroom. And last year, they were not allowed to come into the building and they couldn't come, but we were able to bring them into Zoom meetings. So we were in person, but they were able to come into Zoom. So even though they were not present physically in the space, they were able to participate in the learning. And I have found that when I involve them in their learning that is happening in the classroom, they know more about what is going on. They not only know their child better in this setting, but they get to know their classmates and what the class is about. And so they are more informed about the things that are happening in the classroom and how we are supporting their whole child in the classroom. Before pandemic, we do a lot of field trips. So for the field trips, I invite them to be chaperones, and we have a specific responsibilities for them. So that's another opportunity where they get to support me and I get to support them, and we get to have conversations too. So I think that's one big thing. But also sometimes before I became a responsive classroom teacher, I used to call parents every time there was something very negative about students, like we need to have a meeting and we need to talk about this. And after I became a responsive classroom teacher, I started noticing like positive things about every child in my class and the importance of sharing those things in informal ways or formal ways, just like sending an email, a note, just like when at pick up time, drop off time, and just sharing those stories. And I have, so I think that that is also kind of strengthening the relationship with the parents when parents know that you're really getting to know the child and that you are paying attention to those positive things, and that yes, sometimes things don't work, but you are noticing those positive things. And so when those things that are not so positive happen, the relationship has been already established and your communication with them comes easier, and the suggestions that they give you are received better. So you are not reacting, but responding to the situation in active ways. So, yeah, I'm looking at my notes, but yeah, so I think that those are some ways that I have done in the classroom that really I want to continue doing.
Yeah. Yvette, how about you? Strengthening the relationship with the students through getting to know the parents and families.
I think that an important point that Patty made was welcoming parents into the learning space. I would often give parents a survey early on in the school year, and then I would do parents as experts and pull from their level of expertise, and they would become guest speakers or come in and do some activities with students. So one way also to get to know them, welcome them into the classroom, and continue with that partnership. It makes students feel special, important, right? When their parents are coming in to share what they're doing and to connect that to the curriculum that's going on in the classroom. Having parents come in just to volunteer in any way was also important. Letting them know that they're always welcome into our space. I know that with the year and a half that we've had, of course, that was impossible. But as we start transitioning to some kind of normalcy, keeping that in mind, what are some ways that parents can feel that they're a part of that community, and it gives students and parents alike that deeper sense of ownership. So letting them know, giving them access to you. These are the ways that we can communicate. These are the ways that we can continue to work together. I know that I've worked at schools where we've had neighborhood walks, and we've done that early on in the school year. It's another way to see families in their environment, right? And you can capture a lot from that. Other than home visits, I've supported schools who also do the home visits. During the pandemic, we were going to neighborhoods, bringing devices to families who could not come and pick up the devices. And they just see you in a different light when you do that. We had teachers and administrators during the summer who would hop on the bus and go from neighborhood to neighborhood with lunch for students or food. So just, letting them know that, hey, I'm here not just as your child's teacher, but as someone who's interested, who wants to help and support the family. And at the same time, this is a way that you can also contribute to this partnership.
Yeah, the idea that we're more than just teachers, but we're caregivers too. So when they're with us, we're gonna, do everything we can to care for them. Melanie, anything to add? There was some good stuff shared.
I just kind of to circle back to what Patty said at the beginning, I think, how are we framing our connection with parents when we talk to students? So, I think it was a fairly common practice for me and my fellow educators back in the day, right before I was a responsive classroom educator, to just connect with families when there was trouble, and also to sort of use that as something you would hang over the student's head. Like, I'm going to be calling your parent if this doesn't get straightened out. And to reframe that as, I talked with mom yesterday, and we want to make a plan so that you're remembering to wear your glasses at school today. So mom said she would make sure they were in your backpack, and I said I would make sure I would remind you. And so what's your part in that? And just helping students realize that, like, when I talk to your parent or caregiver, it's because we're working to support you, and we all have a piece of this puzzle. I think can help strengthen the relationship with the parents and the caregivers, and also with the students.
That's really important. And I just want to acknowledge a couple of comments that came through the chat. A few people were just talking about how it can be challenging to reach out in the summer because assignments might change, or the district doesn't release the class list to the teachers until, right before school starts. So I just want to acknowledge that not everyone has a chance to reach out before school begins. So just think about some of these practices too, as school is beginning, that first week, those first couple days and weeks of school, trying to implement some of these strategies as well. And Jane, what else do you have to add? Something from your book or something that you have seen over time with all the work you've done with schools?
I think because everybody said such powerful things about the ways we want to connect with families, but to add to that, the idea that keeps coming to the center, and the same thing that I noticed as I was writing, and it seems really obvious, but how important relationships are, and building them and taking the time to work and make those things happen. It kind of reminds me of, say you're someplace in public and someone makes a comment. When it's a positive comment, how you respond and how that connection can be created when you're like, someone's like, oh, I love that color on you. And even if you don't know them, the way that you respond is different. So even that small connection of, I'm just reaching out because I'm your child's teacher, and that one positive comment that comes out of that. And the same thing is the reverse. If a stranger says something like, oh, that's a terrible color on you, and then how you're like, well, you don't even know me, and how that feels. The same thing for families when they feel like they don't have that connection with us, and vice versa. It's anything that comes from us at that point is, you don't really know me and my child, and you want to be able to create a relationship and establish a relationship in which parents and families are able to hear what you have to share, because they recognize and understand that it's coming from the best place, because you've set it up so that that relationship creates that. And so then when you do have to share something that might be challenging for parents to hear, you've already created this relationship where they're like, you're thinking about my child and what's best for them and their success. And so parents are then more willing to hear that information, and you're more able to then collaborate to come up with a solution for something that might be a little bit tricky to navigate at the start.
Absolutely. And Hillary just typed into the chat a note about using the term parent. And I guess maybe I should have addressed that in the beginning, because I know that you address this in your book, Jane. But we do talk about the fact that we're talking about all caregivers. So the adults in children's lives, the grown-ups, the caregivers, your family members. And so Jane, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about how that's like addressed, because we use the term parent, but we're kind of like thinking about it in an inclusive way.
And all families. And so it's not just the parent in maybe the way that maybe when I was in school, that's what you talk about with the parent. It's just more for the ease in the writing, but thinking about, when we think about parents, we're thinking about caregivers, whether they are a guardian, whether it's a grandparent, an uncle, an older sibling, whether it's a foster parent, that it's encompassing of all of those, and not just what may be perceived as just like the mother and the father, and that's it. Knowing that there are many different family structures, and all those different structures and all those people who care for those students are there to see their success. And so even though the term parent is used, it's not intended to portray just that way of thinking where it's just this person or just this person, but all the people who care for students and looking to make sure that they're successful in school.
Thank you for addressing that. I really appreciate it. And I We should have done that up front. So thank you, Hillary, for calling us out on that. I appreciate it. And I do know a lot of people use the term like the grown-ups, you know, especially for little kids, like the grown-ups in your life, because anyone maybe 12 and up seems like a big grown-up when you're 5 years old. So that seems like a good term. I want to do a giveaway. So I want to give away a couple copies of Jane's book. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can find which one I want to share. Let's see. To get ready to do our giveaway, it would be great if everyone could make sure that your name is showing up in the chat as like your first name and last name. That way we can make sure that we are picking someone and not like being confused about who we're giving the books to. So if you could use your first and last name in the and as you show up as a participant, that would be really helpful for us. And there are some directions here on the screen for how you can do that. So you don't have to type your whole name into the chat, but if you want to rename your name, so like some of you just show up as Tracy or Sue or Amy. And if you could put your whole name in there, that would be super helpful for us. And then so there's some directions there on how to like rename yourself in there if you'd like to. And just so you know, the chat does not show up in the recording of the webinar, so you don't have to worry about your name being shared and recorded on the webinar. What we're going to do is in the chat, I'd like you to type in the grade levels you work with and your role. Okay, so people are saying there's no participants button, so don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. So just type into the chat the grade levels you work with and your role. And I'm super excited to see this chat go crazy. It's gonna be really fun to see what people are teaching, what kind of roles you have. And as people scroll through, I'm gonna pick a couple names for our giveaway. All right, so if you're a winner, I want you to set your chat. Right now, sometimes people's chats can say to everyone or it can say to host and panelists. And if you're a winner, just set your chat to host and panelists. And if you could type your full name and complete address, I'll jot it down and then the books will ship sometime after September 30th. So I wish I had a drum roll. How about we're going to give books away to Karen Murphy and Melissa Lloyd. Congrats. So if you could just change the chat to host and panelists and then type your name and your full address, we will drop these in the mail to you. So that's super exciting. So that's Melissa Lloyd and Karen Murphy. Congrats. I love giving things away. Makes me feel like Oprah or we're on The Price is Right or something. So we're gonna continue with some of our questions. And Jane, I'm going to start this discussion off with you. A part of this book describes and digs into cultural pluralism. And what does that look like and sound like from the perspective of the book when you're thinking about the parent-teacher partnership? And how does a positive parent-teacher partnership create that student-centered learning environment?
I think one of the first things that I wanted to kind of differentiate was when we think, or at least I know when I first thought about something being like culturally diverse, it was the idea of a mixing bowl and everyone's part of this mixing bowl. And so that we have this class that's a mixing bowl, and starting to recognize and realize that in order for all students to be heard and seen, but then also how it extends to the families, that perception of a mixing bowl had to shift a little bit to more like a salad bowl. Because when you think of a salad, it's one entity, but within the salad, the tomato is still a tomato, the lettuce is still lettuce, the cheese is still cheese, and so on. And we want in the classroom community for students to still be able to be their unique selves, whether you teach in a school where it seems or it appears as though all the students are similar, or the community in your classroom is similar. Every child comes with a background and experiences that are different from the students from the student next to them, their classmate. And so that the idea of being able to dig into what makes each child unique helps us to also then connect to what makes each family unique, and being able to bring that into the classroom and consider, so when I'm teaching this, what can I also include, and how can I not only be the teacher, but also be the learner at the same time as I learn about my students and their families, to be able to create an experience in which it's not just like student-centered, but each student-centered. And I'm thinking about each individual child within the teaching and the learning that's happening in the classroom. And then being able to convey that to families so that they can also see, my child knew a lot about this and that was acknowledged, or this was an experience that my student had and that was acknowledged. And that's important for it to be a space where children can be who they are. And that is okay. And that's important to create that atmosphere and that climate in the classroom community too, so that it extends beyond just the classroom.
That idea of each student-centered is so important, because we can be student-centered and think about our class as a whole, but there's all the individuals, and then each individual student has their own individual family that comes along with them. And so I like that phrasing, that way to kind of just picture it. Yvette, something to add to that?
I think that that cultural autonomy needs to be preserved and celebrated and highlighted in different ways within our learning communities. Students need to feel that pride and sense of individuality, and feel good about it, right? Different doesn't mean, let's put that aside. That's not important. Yes, we have to work together as a learning community, but within that learning community, we have to have our own sense of autonomy. And when it comes to culture, and I live in an area that is very culturally diverse. And so you couldn't possibly be able to meet students' needs and to make families feel welcome unless you are celebrating and inviting those differences. However, as we get to know our students, we have to consider those differences as we support them with the academics and that social emotional learning piece, right? Because it's going to look differently in different cultures. So I think that it's super important for that tomato to feel good about being the tomato, right? And whether you're a cherry or a plum or whatever kind of tomato you are, it's important that others know what is it that makes me different, and what's great about that. I often have students talk about ways they love to celebrate with their families and their friends. And I've had parents tell me, oh my goodness, such and such came home and we couldn't believe what he shared about it. And it's about another child's culture, which they would have never known about if you don't provide those opportunities, right? For them to share and to be accepted for who they are. And so I think it's really important for us to think about those guiding principles, knowing your students and also knowing families and celebrating those differences and the diversity that they bring into our learning spaces.
Melanie, anything to add there?
One of the things that came to mind for me was, what does the actual learning environment look like and who does it reflect? So thinking about, and I feel like in the RC approach, one of the easiest ways to sort of accomplish that is to let the students create the space as much as possible, right? So, a lot of our RC materials talk about, put the bulletin board paper and the border up, and that's it before the kids get there, because it's their work that's going to go up on the wall. But I think that needs to extend to families too. And, we alluded to that earlier with how are we naming family members, but also how are we inviting family members in? How are we holding donuts for dads assemblies, or are we holding meet and greets that are more inclusive and welcoming for any grown-up person in the child's family who's available during the school day? Are we looking for ways that we can go into the community and hold conferences at a community center or, you know, an apartment complex? Like, how are we reflecting the school community in the school, and how are we working to honor the communities that are part of our school building?
Really important points. Patty, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, along with what everybody has said, which is very important. I think that discovery of like who I am and what is my identity and how I am that important part of this community that I'm forming and the impact that my actions have in the community are so important. And also keeping in mind that there are some communities or in the classroom sometimes is not very diverse. So you have communities that are not diverse, and how as a teacher, how you can bring that awareness to when you don't have a diverse community. And it's so just bringing that awareness in your classroom and making everybody more open to, well, we have other things as well in the world, maybe not around in our community. We have one community here, everybody is unique and special. But we also have other communities around the world and how they are distinct, and also how we are connecting, even when we are from different places, how we connect with one another and we're helping each other and building those, building the awareness of like myself, but others as well, and others in this community that I belong to, and other communities that are available for me as well.
Really good ideas. So another question I wanted to ask is, you know, this past year and a half, especially the past year, had a big impact on school to home partnerships. It was difficult because a lot of kids had to learn from home, and we couldn't meet our parents in person. And so parents and teachers found unique ways to connect to support their student learning. And is there anything that worked for you last year that you hope, either as an educator or something that worked for you as a parent, that you hope you'll carry forward beyond this past year into a more typical school year? Melanie, was there anything that you felt you want to hold on to and keep?
I think just holding parent-teacher conferences over Zoom can be like a game changer. You know, one piece of that, right, was that students in our district, and it sounds like in a lot of other places in the country, they all had Chromebooks in their home. And so it was easy for parents to jump on a Zoom and talk to their child's teacher through that medium. And if there really isn't any reason for us to get rid of that.
Yeah, I agree. And even when some of you were talking about having parents Zoom in to share their special talents instead of having to physically be in the classroom, you know, how great is that? So someone who can't leave work, but maybe they can get on and FaceTime with the class during the day is great. Patty, do you have other things to add to that?
Something that worked for me last year was documenting learning and sharing it in blogs. So there was a lot of like tons of videos and pictures that, because parents were not able to come here, I was able to document more than ever I have done with that learning. And so it was a good record of not only for parents to see what is happening in the classroom, not only for kids at the end of the year to reflect on what have we done this year, but also for me just to see. So it was in different ways to reflect on that learning. So that that saving those pictures, those videos was a good way to reflect on the year, on the learning, and how much we have grown all together, and still keep that communication with parents where they still feel involved. So that's one thing that I would probably continue strengthening this year, is that documentation of learning.
And Yvette, anything you want to hold on to and carry forward?
I think that it would work in the virtual as well as the in-person setting, just becoming very purposeful about having students talk to someone at home about blank, something that happened in the classroom that day. talk to someone at home about the rule or the guideline that we focused on today. Tell someone at home what you learned about soil. Tell someone at home how somebody was helpful today in class to you, or how you were helpful to someone. So I think that that is something that could carry in any of the formats that we are using. And it helps students not only share, right, what's going on, recall that information, but it also informs those adults at home about what's going on, and it keeps them informed.
Sure. And I saw in the chat, someone said IEP meetings. So being able to, connect with parents during this, typically those meetings happen during the day, and sort of be able to pull that team together and be able to, have those important meetings over Zoom is just a game changer. Jane, anything else you want to add to this? Anything from as a parent or as an educator?
I think, and it's a little bit different because it's something I feel that emerged greatly during this time for both parents and educators, was the idea of approaching things with more grace and empathy. We had the opportunity to see into families' homes and see all the things that children are trying to navigate at the same time while learn, and then the reverse of families being able to see how teachers are trying to navigate everything and still be able to teach. And I think that's something that I hope doesn't go away, is as things move forward and as learning happens and as teaching happens, that we still have the ability to pause and approach things with empathy and grace. If something didn't go well, whether it's for a family or whether it's for an educator, that there's that moment to be able to pause and recognize, I already know, and I got to see what it was like in that home and what it's like for families in general trying to navigate a lot, but then also vice versa, where parents got to see, well, teachers had to immediately switch and do a whole lot more than before. And so that when something doesn't go right, or I didn't get this piece, that we can then remember, you know what, there's a lot happening for everyone. It's not just me. To be able to then approach things in that way and be mindful of that, so that the things that we say and do is not just, okay, we're back to normal, but then remembering, yes, and there's still all these other things that still happen in the background that we don't see on both sides. So being able to remember that as we move forward.
That's a really powerful message. And I think, as difficult as it was last year, it did also give us some insights into, like you said, both ways. So looking into the homes of our students and the families and what they were dealing with, but also for the families to get a look into the day of a teacher and all of the things that we're doing to sustain the learning in difficult and challenging situations. So it's a really important point. I want to do another book giveaway, so we have some time to do another one. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have another something that everyone can type into the chat. This is, if you could type into the chat, an opportunity you have during the school year to interact positively with families or parents and caregivers. So is it your back to school night? Do you have a special science day where, kids come in on a Saturday? Do you have your, is it your conferences? Is it your, do you have like a 4th grade celebration at the end of the year? What is your opportunity that you have during the school year to interact positively with families and parents and caregivers? And I just want to see this chat flooded with ideas. And I'm sure some of these special events are starting as school starts back. Oh, some fundraisers too, like a fun run, skits, community day, open door day, ice cream social, parent coffee. We love our food and education. That's great. Oh, and making phone calls and Zooms. Nice. I'm going to scroll through and pick a couple winners just randomly. It's not judging your answer. All right. So how about Rosanna Salcido? I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Rosanna Salcido and Ariel Lang. If both of you could just change your chat to just the panelists and then give us your full name and address, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of the book. And these are really great ideas in the chat too, of different things and how you connect with parents as school begins, or all during the school year. Great. So some closing thoughts. You know, all of you have shared your thoughts and ideas from as being, you know, a responsive classroom educator and from working with your students, making those important relationships between the home and the school, and thinking about the shifts that we make over time as we get to know our families. And so we thought it would be fun to close to share a sentence or thought that summarizes maybe how you've shifted your thinking about working with parents and building that relationship. And so we often use this in some of our workshops. We use the sentence, the reflection sentence, I used to think, but now I know, or and I know. And so you can think about using that framework as a reflection for thinking about parent-teacher partnerships. So I'm going to start with Melanie. You can share your reflection.
So I used to think that relationships with caregivers were sort of this very black or white, engaged or reluctant sort of dichotomy. And now I know that all parents want the best for their students. All caregivers are invested in the success of the children that they care for. And there is a spectrum along which they are available to show up at school for special events and respond to emails and phone calls, etc. And so I now know that I need to hold empathy, as Jane mentioned before, and recognize that parents and caregivers show up in the ways that they can, and they're doing their best all the time.
Patty, how about for you?
I used to think that the relationship between caregivers and teachers was once in a while, just like every time I have conferences. Now I know that it's fundamental to build a relationship before school starts and maintain those relationships throughout the year so that we can support engaging academics in the classroom and support the students as a whole.
Click in and it won't unmute me. I used to think that caregiver-teacher relationships were parent or caregiver choice, right? They cared enough, they were involved, and if they didn't, that was a long time ago, because now I know that there's a lot I can do to reel them in. There's a lot I can do to show that this is a shared responsibility, right? That we can have a positive relationship, that relationship is essential to their children's success in school and anywhere else, right? But it starts there. And so it is something that I can impact.
And Jane?
I used to think that building strong relationships with just a few families was pretty good. And now I recognize that working to build relationships with families, although it's work, the outcome means the success of all the students, not just the few that you built the relationships with.
Really important words to end off our webinar tonight. And I just want to share my screen one more time and to let you know that this book is available for pre-order. So if you're interested in picking up a copy, and like I said, they'll probably ship in early October. And we have another webinar coming up next month, September 15th at 7 p.m. And you can register for this on our Responsive Classroom website. This will be about another new publication, Make Learning Meaningful. I'm the author of that, so everyone will get to see me again, but I'm going to have someone else interview me. So I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. this has been just a wonderful night to kind of get in that back to school mindset. And to, we're always so focused about our classroom and our students, and we have to think about our families and connecting with them as well. And so Jane, I just can't wait for your resource to come out, and just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. So thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone joining us. So thank you. And Rosanna, I'm going to keep this open so you can send me your address so we can get you that book. So thank you, everyone. Good night.